Now on to Hong Kong, where closing arguments began today in the national security trial for Catholic pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai. Lai was arrested in 2020 under a national security law backed by Beijing. The 77-year-old is in solitary confinement, and reports say that he's being deprived of medical care and even the Holy Eucharist. Prosecutors say Lai continued to make requests for sanctions, blockades, and other so-called hostile activities in the months after his arrest. Amid the closing arguments in Hong Kong, President Donald Trump says that he will do, quote, everything to save Jimmy Lai ahead of the verdict. The president made the remarks during a radio interview with Fox News. Now, for more let's turn to Gordon Chang, senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute, author also of The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, great to be with you. And first off, as we mentioned, the closing arguments began today. What happened in the courtroom?
Well, what we're hearing is basically the end of the beginning of the last phase of this trial. It can last for another couple weeks, maybe a bit longer. But the issue here is going to be how long will the Hong Kong authorities drag this out? Because they can spend a very long time coming to a verdict. John Lee, who is the Hong Kong chief executive, really is dug in his heels because Jimmy Lai's trial supports one of his national security narratives. And basically, it's justification for all that the Hong Kong government is doing. The problem here, Eric, is that if Jimmy Lai dies in prison, and he is frail at this point, then he becomes a martyr or becomes more of a martyr. And that means that this narrative then gets beyond the control of the Hong Kong government and gets beyond the control of Beijing. And
we are expecting a guilty verdict just because that's the way that they operate over there?
Yes, there's 100% it will be a guilty verdict. This has been pre-planned from the very beginning. And one of the things that Beijing has often done is after a guilty verdict, they will give a medical parole or some other release to someone who has been convicted. And that very well may be the way that Jimmy gets out of this. But that guilty verdict can take a long time, as I mentioned, because the Hong Kong government pretty much now is not going to settle this before the end of the year.
And now President Trump is getting involved, really. I mean, speaking on his behalf, what are your thoughts on that? Will that weigh in anything?
I think it's very important because, as President Trump said, he's going to talk to Xi Jinping about this. You know, President Trump has a streak in him that he abhors violence. He abhors all of these things that China has been doing to dissidents such as Jimmy. And so this is at the core of President Trump. And so it was not surprising that he gave that interview to Fox News where he said, look, he's going to save Jimmy Lai. He's going to talk to Xi Jinping. This is very much the way that Trump looks at the world.
And have any other world leaders weighed in on behalf of Jimmy Lai?
Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has said something, but he's been really late to the game, as was his predecessor, Sunak. They have not done very much. And remember, Jimmy Lai is a British citizen. He's a real British citizen, not a BNO. So really what we're talking about here is Britain really at the rear of this, President Trump at the forefront of our efforts.
Well, Gordon Chang, we always appreciate your insight. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Eric.